Hi, I'm Jeremy Poole, and today we're going to dive into hyperlinks in Recollector. We all know what hyperlinks are. They're those blue underlined bits of text that you see in a web browser, which when you click on them, take you somewhere else and give you some additional information. Well, Recollector supports hyperlinks as well. And the reason it does that is because there's really only two basic data types that Recollector automatically keeps track of. They're the bits of text that correspond to the values in your data fields, and there's images. But there are other kinds of information that you might want to associate with items in your collection. For example, there's scanned documents. Suppose you've scanned an invoice for a particular item in your collection. It'd be really nice if in the item details page you could bring up that invoice to look at whenever you wanted to. Well, you can do that using a hyperlink. Another example is links to web pages. Suppose there's a museum out there that collects the same kind of thing that you collect, and they've got a website, and maybe they have a web page that extensively describes some particular item that corresponds to an item that you also have in your collection. It'd be really nice to have a link to the museum's web page, and you can do that with a hyperlink. Actually, overall, there's 6 different kinds of hyperlinks that you can create in Recollector, and we'll be looking at each of those today. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using my map collection. And in particular, I'm going to be using a single record in the map collection that I want to enhance through providing hyperlinks within it. And we're going to start with the kind of hyperlink that lets you make a web page reference. Now, if you notice on the item details that we're looking at down near the bottom, there's a field called Zoomable Image. Now, I happen to have scanned a lot of the maps in my collection at a high resolution, and I've put those scanned images up on the web, on a website. And I would like for my item details to be able to simply click to take me to the appropriate web page at my website to show me that high-res image. So, how do we do that? Well, all of the hyperlinks are created through the editor. So let's open the editor for this record. And notice down here near the bottom we have zoomable image, and I have text that says high-res online image. Let's turn that entire text into a hyperlink to the appropriate web page. And to do that, we select the text that's going to be turned into a hyperlink, and we right-click. And there is a Create Edit Special Hyperlink button. And that brings us to the dialog that lets you define individual hyperlinks. Now, this first one that we're going to use is a full web URL hyperlink, also known as a W-type link. Each of these 6 types is known by a letter. So this one is a W-type link. So let's say, okay, there's the link address. And now all we need to provide for this is the URL that should be jumped to in a browser when we click on the hyperlink. And so I've copied this and I'm now pasting it in. And there's the full URL. And that's it. I can test it, but for now I won't test it right here. I'll test it in the actual page. Notice when I've come back into the editor, now the zoomable image is shown as blue and underlined, and its little hover text over it tells you what's going to happen, that's a W link, and it's going to open a web page at that URL. So let's click OK, and now we're back to the item details. But notice now we have a hyperlink. So let's click on it, and it opens up a web browser, and here we are at this zoomable version of this map image. Okay. Now, that's the first one. The second kind of hyperlink I'm going to show you is also a web page reference, but it's one that uses a pattern. And let me explain that a little bit. Because I put all of these images onto the same website that I created, I have URLs that are very similar to one another for each of the different images in my collection. And so instead of having to type in the full URL, I can use a pattern where the URL is basically remembered by the program, and just a little bit of that URL gets changed and is different from one item to the next. So let's show you how that works. Go back into the editor and let's go and select that same text again, and again go create edit special hyperlink. You know, we saw before, this is a W-type link I have now, but let's change it to be a P-type link. And in a P-type link, there is a pattern, which is the most of the URL is present in a pattern. To do that, we need to create a pattern definition. And I want to create that now, so I'm going to add a new pattern definition. And for the key, I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Online Gallery. And now I'm going to type in this case, I'm going to paste in the pattern I want to use. Now this pattern is a URL very much like the one we saw before, but notice at the last part of the pattern, I have a $1, and that indicates that there's some substitutable piece of the pattern that I'm going to use, and that substitutable piece will be different from one map to the next. But that's the only thing I'm going to have to specify as I move from one record to the next. So let's click OK, and now it's asking me what's the value of parameter number 1. That's what's going to replace that $1. And if you remember from before, we know in this case it's 146A. So as I'm creating each of these links on different records in my collection, all I'll need to supply is this little bit of parameter 1 information. So let's click OK, and it looks just like it did before. It shows that it's a p-link, and it's going to take me to the same URL that we were taken to before. And there we are. We can just test it to make sure it still works. And it's the same thing we saw before. So the end result of these two types of hyperlink is identical. It's just how much work goes into specifying it. And as I say, if you've got a lot of links in your collection as a whole that are to different URLs that are very similar but all share the same pattern, it'll be much quicker to set up a pattern and take that approach. Okay, for the next thing, we're going to look at a file reference. Notice here under condition, I have at the end it says conservation done by Louise Baptiste. Well, I happen to have an invoice for the conservation work that Louise did, and I would like to be able to bring up that invoice and look at it. And I can do that by making a reference to the file that contains it. So let's go back into the editor, find in the condition this bit of text, conservation done by Louise Baptiste, and let's turn that into a hyperlink. And it's a reference to just a single file. So it's what I call an F-type link, an associated file. And now all I need to specify is, well, what is that file? So I can browse, and it'll bring up my various files in my image directory, which is where I put this file, and I identified it the file. And that's all there is to it. So let's click and click again, and now we have a different kind of hyperlink. Let's see what happens when I click on that. So here it brought up Adobe Acrobat because this particular file is a PDF file, and on my system PDF files are by default brought up using Acrobat. And here I can look at the full conservation document that I have. Similar to a file reference is a reference to a media file, let's say an audio or a video clip. And for this map, I actually made a video that shows how this map is folded into a book. And so let's make a hyperlink, a media reference hyperlink for that. You can see here folds into the book. Let's turn that into a hyperlink. So let's go into the editor. Let's take the folds into the book text. Let's create a special hyperlink for that. And it's a media type hyperlink. And just like the file one, this just wants me to browse to and to identify the media file. And in this case, it's a movie file, MOV. So I've identify it, click OK again, and now we have another hyperlink. And this one, when we click on it, opens up a media viewer program. I can watch this particular video that shows the map being unfolded or folded back into the book. The next hyperlink that I want to show you is what's called an extended information hyperlink. It's also can be referred to as like a footnote hyperlink. Now in this collection, for example, I have a references field, and I use that to identify books, reference books, that happen to talk about this particular map, this particular item. And I can identify the book by, in this case, the name, the last name of the author, Sabin. But I might want to know a little more about that reference book, like what's the title of the book and when was it published and other information. Basically, it's like a citation. Well, I don't want that full citation present in every item details view that has a reference value, because it's kind of cumbersome and clutters up the presentation. But I would like to be able to look at that additional bibliographical information if I want to, and that's done using a extended information hyperlink. So let's create that. Back into the editor, and here's the Sabin reference. So let's select it and create edit special hyperlink, and now this is an X-type link, extended information. And this works similar to the patterns in that we have a key to identify a particular additional bit of information. In this case, the entire content of the reference to Sabin's work. Now, if I hadn't yet created this, let me show you how I can create it. I'm going to add a new extended key and a value for that key. And let's give the key a name, and not a bad idea to give it the same name as it's going to be referenced by in the item details. And then let me type in the content of the citation information. I'm actually going to copy and paste it, and there it is. So there's a full bibliographical citation. And by the way, you can fancy up this bit of information using, for example, different formats. Let's turn the title into an italics reference. So I click OK, and now I can turn Sabin in my item details into an extended information display and show you what that looks like. So here we have Sabin. If I hold my cursor over it, up pops this full bibliographical information about Sabin. I can also click on it, and it'll show it as a footnote at the bottom. Now, that seemed like a lot of work, but I only have to do it once for each book or each reference that I'm making. So for example, I happen to have Sabin mentioned again in this very same record. And let's make a citation reference there too. So if I scroll down to the bottom of my information, it says, according to Sabin. Well, why not just make that a hyperlink too? And so I can say, create a special hyperlink. It's an X-type link. Sabin, it links to the extended key, also called Sabin. The program by default will try to see a matching key and text, and that's it. Just okay, I'm done. And now there's two places in this record that I can find out the additional information about Sabin. But it doesn't have to be in the same record. I may have 10 maps in my collection that are referenced by Sabin, and each one of those can use that same bibliographical citation, which I just needed to enter once. The last type of hyperlink I'm going to demonstrate is a jump to link. Now, you may already know about the simple kinds of jump to links, where if you have the ID number of another record, you can turn that directly into a link that will jump to that other record. But sometimes it'd be nicer to be able to have that kind of jump to link represented by blue underlined text rather than just the ID number. So in this example, I have another record in the collection that's from the same book, and I'd like to make a hyperlink to that. And I have some text here that mentions that other map. So let's create another hyperlink. So click Edit, find that text that I want to turn into a link, right-click on it and choose Create Edit Special Hyperlink, turn it into an R-type link, and enter the ID number of the record you want to jump to. I happen to know that the number is 146B, and I will click OK. I'll click OK again, and now it is turned into a jump to link. And so let's click on it, and there it is. It's taken me to the other related record. Notice, let's go in this one more time here. Let's go into the editor, and select this same hyperlink. Notice that there's a choice here to link to the ID number in the current collection. There's also the ability to link to an ID number of a different collection, in a different collection. If I choose that, it gives me a drop-down list that shows other collections that I could use. Now, the limitation in this is that you can only jump to a record in another collection when that other collection file resides in the same folder on your computer as the current collection. So if you have a bunch of sibling collections, each of which has its XML file, and all those XML files reside in the same directory on your computer, then you can actually have links from one to the other. In the case that those kinds of links make sense. But in this case, I'm making a link to a record in the same collection, so I don't have to take advantage of that feature. So that's it. And now take a look at our item details. It's a much richer display than what we started out with, because we now have a variety of different kinds of information, files, websites, extended information, jump to associations that we can access through a single click. And all of this is saved as part of our collection. So I hope you'll try to take advantage of the hyperlinks that are available in Recollector. They're fully described and discussed in great detail in the user's manual if you want more information than you got from this video. But the idea of this video is to inspire you to give it a try. Thank you very much for watching.